So, with no further ado, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Peter Lawrence, and I'm broadcasting from Treviso, Italy, and it's now 8 p.m. in the evening. And we've got with us a very special guest, Dr. Rob Kessinger, who is, we're honored to have him here tonight with us. Rob is from Rolla, Missouri, and the heartland of America. And he's going to share some information with all of us here in Europe, especially, and overseas, South America. We might have some people listening over in Asia as well. We're getting some interest all over the world for this KCUCS program that seems to be picking up a lot of speed. And you are the impetus for that, Doctor. So I'd like, if you could, share a little bit about yourself for the folks over here in Europe and in Asia and in South America. And give us a little background about you and where you're from and what you do and how you got maybe into your introduction into upper cervical world. Would you try to do
All
that
right.
for us?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dr. Peter. Always a pleasure being with you. You're one of my favorite people, and so always good to be with you.
Thank you.
Well, to start off with, I'd say I'm a fourth generation chiropractor. So my great granddad actually graduated, went to school in the 1920s. So my granddad was actually sweet on his daughter, and he was a teenager and had plans to go to medical school. So one day he was going to go out and he needed his father-in-law, his future father-in-law, the chiropractor, the original, had a farm, and he was going to haul some hay or get some hay together. And to impress the future father-in-law to be, he was going to go out and work with him. But he
Okay.
came down and he had scarlet fever. Scarlet fever is known to last about 2 weeks, and it's pretty hard on you. And he was just in the beginning of it. And so my great granddad said, well, I'm going to adjust you and you'll be in the field by tomorrow. So he adjusted him. And sure enough, he was in the field the next day.
There you go.
And he decided, you know what? If chiropractic can do that, I'm going to chiropractic school. And so he
Wow.
graduated in 1949. And so anyway, I say that because I am very proud of that heritage. 100 years going in chiropractic. So for me, in the very early 90s, I got a bootleg tape of Sigafus, the great Sigafus. It was a bootleg tape, and I'll just share with you. After I heard that tape, it lit a fire in me. And although chiropractic was in my DNA, there were coals, there were embers. And when Sigafus spoke, it blew on those coals and lit a fire.
Beautiful.
And I've never looked back since. And so I followed Sigafus incessantly for a few years after that. If he spoke somewhere, man, I went because I just couldn't get enough. And I know, Dr. Peter, you've had a similar experience. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, sir. Once you kind of get bit by that bug, it's like you just can't put out the fire. It's like
Can't
it's
put out the
unquenchable.
fire. Yeah.
Unquenchable. You're right. You're absolutely right. I had the same
Sigafus
experience.
was a master.
Yeah, he was had the golden tongue. He was able to express himself in a way that I think got people passionate. He had a
You
certain
know, I think there's scores upon scores of doctors of chiropractic out there that heard him that wasn't even thinking about going into chiropractic that made their life journey and lit that fire. He certainly did that for me. Well, there was a
yeah,
natural progression that he said read the green books. And the green books are books written by BJ Palmer, developer of chiropractic. And if you read green books, you're ultimately going to come to understand the upper cervical spine.
that's
And
correct.
so I wanted to, just as pure as possible, I wanted to do a technique as close to what BJ Palmer was doing in the research center. And that's how I happened across Dr. Kale.
Uh-huh.
So I got a hold of Dr. Kale, and he said, come on down to South Carolina. We went down there and went to the first seminar. and I think it was on pattern analysis, something like that. It was an exciting seminar, but I'd already been to Singapore seminars, so I had already been excited. But I was like, okay, where's the meat? How's how does the rubber hit the road, right? So he took an X-ray of me and he adjusted me. And the first time he adjusted me, and I know this sounds kind of weird. I understand. I can only explain what happened to me, right?
Okay.
But I heard a voice inside my head when he adjusted me, and it went like this. I don't know if he's going to like me, and I don't know if I'm going to like him, but I got to learn how to do what he just did because that was something. And it went just like that. And
Mm,
it was
mm,
revolutionary.
mm.
And it became a quest for me from that day forward to understand what is going on and why is that upper cervical, why is it so powerful?
Yeah.
What's in it that when you unlock it, miracles happen. What is it in that upper cervical spine? When you unlock it, the brain starts working better, the body starts working better, the body starts restoring in health and life. And all these things we talk about in the chiropractic philosophy come to life. And that became a mission. That became a mission for me. So
Wow.
so that's kind of an introduction. I got on fire, and then I started teaching with Dr. Kale at that time, and
Right.
it was a wonderful experience being around Dr. Kale.
I can
You know,
imagine.
we're talking about the X-rays.
Correct.
One of the things that happened in that process was that Dr. Kale was a Picasso, a real artisan. He was, he had the best adjustment that I remember. I mean, he just had an uncanny ability to make that adjustment.
Hmm.
And he would look at his X-rays and just put them up in the air and
Yeah.
look at them and say, it's a this, it's that. Now, if you knew Dr. Kale's personality, you would enjoy this. But he'd put that film up like that, and he'd say it's ASL or something like that, and I loved it because a student would be sitting right there and they'd want to know. And they'd be like, well, how do you know it's ASL? And he'd look at him and he said, because it is.
Uh-huh. Little dogmatic, little,
And oh yeah.
yeah,
So he
yeah.
was one of those old, he was one of those old dinosaurs in a good way. He was one of those kind of forefathers of the chiropractic. Man, he was hardcore in his belief in chiropractic, and
Oh
he
yeah.
was good at what he did. So that's kind of how we cut our teeth.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so it's just a wonderful experience being around him for those years.
I'm sure. I mean, I had a similar experience. I think my dad is also, well, I'm a second generation chiropractor. And
Yes.
so my dad graduated in 49 as well. And but we never grew up really with that fire in our bellies about chiropractic from like the standard old time kind of, I guess, straight guys, you would say. In those
Yes.
days we had the straights and the mixers, and so it was more from the other camp. My dad was from the national camp, and so BJ in his mind was kind of looked down upon and frowned upon as being horse and buggy and the old fashioned guys. And my dad was trying to get more modernized and wanted to be more the physician type. So I grew up in that framework. And so when I started going to Sigafus, when I first started to talk about him, and my brother and I, Scott, we would go to DE and hang out with Sid Williams and learn from Sid and sit at his feet and get, all of his stuff showered upon you. We started getting into, he would spit on you. That's what I meant by showered. I know
Oh
that's
yeah.
right.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But
It
it
was
was just,
anointed.
yeah, it was anointed. It was an amazing experience with those kind of guys, and they had the fire that kind of I was attracted to as well, like a moth to light. And
Yeah.
so I can relate to what you're saying, Dr. Kessinger, tremendously. For me, I remember when you told the story about with your difficulty in the X-rays, because I know we're going to move into the X-ray boot camp now. I don't want to, belabor too much of, our backgrounds and things of that nature. But the X-ray boot camp, obviously came out of a long, long amount of work on your part and the other KCUS doctors, but I think primarily from you and your blood, sweat, and tears of trying to figure out why was that an ASR, or why was that an ASL, or
Yes.
whatever it was, and that with Dr. Kale being the Picasso that he was, the greatest dancers don't become the greatest teachers, the greatest artists don't become the greatest, or painters don't can't teach others to do what they do. They
Right.
just do it, And so you had to figure that out. And so I know this story about you had mentioned with wearing out the desk of the by sitting for so many hours looking at the x-rays with a three-dimensional view box that you were trying to recreate. Could you go into that story a little bit if you had a little bit of time?
Yeah.
That was a an interesting story.
Yeah, thank you for that prompting. Dr. Kale, as I said, he was just wonderful. And I would say, though, our best learning from Dr. Kale was observation,
Mm,
watching what he did and
right.
trying to replicate what he did. And so I remember one time, and I hadn't told you this story, so this will be a new one for you. I
Oh,
don't think I
okay.
did.
Well, probably.
So back around 1993, 94, by this time I was actually teaching in the Kale program.
Okay.
And so Dr. Kale was in Missouri. And so he came down to the clinic and I welcomed him. It was a great experience having him down to come to the clinic.
Sure.
And because he was my mentor, like
Yeah.
that's my guy, right? So
Oh,
he's
absolutely.
there. So I had 4 or 5 difficult cases or cases I was having difficulties with, and I showed him the x-rays. And I think out of one of those, I had the correct listing, and I was wrong on 3 out of 4 listings. And so to me, I didn't question Dr. Kale. I didn't question him because I had so much confidence, and that was
Right.
rightly placed confidence because he was good.
Yeah.
And so when he said, for instance, I'm just throwing it out there, if I said ASR on something and he said it was ASL, then immediately I was like, okay, it's ASL.
Mm,
Why was I wrong? So I thought
mm.
about those things critically.
Right.
And so it was actually kind of knocked me a little bit because I was like, oh, whoa, wait a second here. I've been doing this hardcore for 2 or 3 years. And he comes in and I'm 3 out of 4. Now, these are difficult cases. So,
Correct.
they're going to probably have a little bit more, to them. But in any case, I was incorrect. Well, I was uncomfortable with my x-ray listings.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
around 1998, in
Okay.
1998, the very first JVSR, Journal of Vertebral Subluxation Research, came
Yep.
out.
Okay.
And it hit my desk. And the front cover of that, on the front cover, was a Blair protractor view. I'd never
Oh,
seen one before. I'd
hello.
heard about them, but I'd
Right.
never seen one. And when I saw that, immediately I had not consulted with anybody. I hadn't called anybody. I'm simply looking at that journal and looking at that picture. And what I recognized when I saw that picture was there was a lot that I did not know. It was, to me, the greatest thing in learning is this. If I like to think of it this way. If you're walking down a hallway and somebody opens a door to a room you've never seen before,
Okay.
that's education. So that's what happened to me. I
Got it.
saw that protractor view. It opened a door into a
Mm-hmm.
room that I've never, ever played in.
Fair
And
enough.
so I
Fair
said,
enough.
what is this? As a matter of fact, I immediately called the editor of JVSR, which happened to be Dr. Ralph Boone at the time. I called him up. I said, what is this? He said, oh, it's a Blair protractor view. Who teaches this? He gave me a list. My next call was to a guy, Dr. Cyril Stacey in Kansas City, who tried to convert me into Blair. That's another story for another day.
We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, he said, come on out, we'll teach it. So he recommended getting a stereo view box. Well, I'd read that in the
In the
research,
books.
in the
Yep.
BJ
Yep.
stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so Blair's had they had the stereo equipment.
Okay.
Interesting
Okay.
thing, just so you know, at that time they were selling those pieces of equipment for $400.
Oh.
But because I was knee chest, they sold it to me for $800.
That's
But
a
I paid it.
yeah, it makes sense. Makes
I said,
sense.
okay, 1,200. I don't care.
I
Give
need
me the
that.
view box.
I
I'm
got it.
passionate, right?
Amazing.
So I sat down, and I'm sorry, I'm making this story
No,
long.
that's brotherly
But
love. That's all right. It's a
so
good
so here's
story.
the thing. For about 8 years in
Okay.
that crucible, day in and day out, I was taking as many as 11 films on people. I
Wow.
was doing stereo APs,
Wow.
stereo laterals, stereo Blair protractos, stereo bass posteriors. If you sat still long enough, I might have got 20 views on you. I
Wow.
was taking views, and then I would sit down, and I was at that time I was seeing on my biggest days, I was seeing 100 visits a day on my biggest
Oh,
days. The
wow.
Mondays was generally that day, and then I would see through the week. So I was seeing volumes of people, and I was in that view box going, going, going
My
for eight
goodness.
straight years.
That's wild. It's like busier
Through
than a
that
one-arm
period of
wallpaper.
time, I began to see what was really going on in three-dimensional. If you see enough of those, you can understand
Yes.
mechanically what is really transpiring. Now,
Got it.
you spoke about this boot camp that we have coming up.
Correct.
So what
Yes.
I've done, what I did through that process is I took that information that I gleaned over those 8 years of that
Right.
crucible, and we put it in a step by step how to find that atlas laterality and be confident about it, how to understand the axis misalignment, and we also found a lot of other cool things. And we also want in the boot camp, we also want to share with people how to do the Blair protractor views.
Okay.
If you never shoot a Blair protractor views, maybe if you're in Europe, you're hampered, you can't, do it. Maybe you can, but if
Right.
you can't, it's still important to learn it, because if you
Yes.
learn it, it will help you understand and see what you're seeing when you see it, when you see the views that you can take.
Even better. Yes.
So yeah, so that's really what we want to accomplish. I want to take what we learned through those years, that crucible, and really put it out in this 4-week boot camp.
That's awesome, Dr. Kessinger. I think that that information that so painstakingly pulling the hair out of your head every night, going through. I mean, I get it. That's information that is so incredibly valuable to systematize it in a way that is mentally digestible and actually applicable clinically. And I
Yes.
think that when I took this boot camp the first time I did it, and I'm not going to act like a shill, but it was an eye-opening experience for me and just changed the game completely, gave me a confidence that I knew what I was looking at. And by the end of it, I was getting at least 75, 80% of the listings correct.
That's
Because
really good.
we go back and forward with the Facebook groups and when we have listing questions and during the course, there's a lot of listings and quizzes that we have to go through and answer. So not an enormous amount, but enough that you start to learn it. And
Right.
I found it was just invaluable the way that you put it together, and it made it a really fantastic experience.
Yeah. Well,
How long
listen,
have you been doing?
there's nothing, professionally. I
Yeah,
want to speak professionally just for a moment.
sure,
There's nothing more valuable you can do than prepare yourself to be able to do your work better.
correct.
So you can
Absolutely.
take 4 weeks of your time, and it's going to be some effort. I would love to say, oh, don't worry about it. You can just take it easy. But if you will commit 4 weeks to really learning something, learning this down, you'll
Correct.
be able to carry your experience of what you've learned through the rest of your professional life.
I
So it
agree.
does take effort, but nothing that's worthwhile is cheap. So if you'll take that, and I don't mean cheap by tuition fees.
Financially,
That's relatively cheap.
yeah.
But the effort you put into it and what you get out of it is
Yes.
going to impact your professional life the rest of your career. So
I
it really
mean,
is a great opportunity.
I totally agree with that. And I think that this is an opportunity that we're getting a lot of interest from Europe on this. Now, obviously, in Europe, there's always that question that comes up about the X-ray limits and
Yes.
restrictions that folks over here kind of run into. One of the great things that we've got now is this new technology, CBCT, which is kind of an end around in terms of the European docs getting into the X-ray game, hooking up with dentists and things like that. If they and there are ways of owning your own machines as well. It's a little bit more complicated, but we can get into some of that stuff as well. I think Dr. Zach and Sedev is going to talk a little bit about that when he does a little bit. 95% of the program, I believe, is going to be led by you, Dr. Kessinger. Is that correct?
That is correct. And let me
Okay,
let me speak to just what you said there because it's a really great point. Dr. Zachary, he's done a great job, and he's going to be presenting some things on CBCT, kind of an introduction to that.
correct.
And if you have the ability to be able to do that, that's going to be a great thing for you.
Yeah.
But the way we put this presentation together,
Mhm.
one of the problems we have in some of the European places is that when you go out to get your X-ray films, you're limited on what kind of views you can take.
Yes,
Now we do AP open mouth, laterals, and base posterior,
correct.
but if it is impossible for you to get a base posterior, we can teach you from just the AP open mouth, a lateral, neutral lateral. We can show you a very efficient way of getting listings. Obviously, if you can go all the way CBCT, you're better off. But let's
Yes,
face it, sometimes people are in situations they can't. I can
correct.
tell you that if you're unable to do that, we can teach you enough that you will
Wonderful.
do quite well with it.
And that's an excellent point because there are limits, and the docs always think, well, yeah, I'd love to do the KC work, but I just can't have the access to the x-rays. But where there's a will, there's a way, obviously. And, with the
Yes.
amount of information that you can provide them, I know for sure that there'll be enough of an accuracy to get the
Yeah.
majority of the listings correct without any major issues. And again, it's always evolving what we're doing, and it seems like CBCT seems to be, I think it's going to be just the future. I don't think there
Yeah.
will be even x-rays in the future.
Yeah.
We won't need them.
It's a wonderful piece of equipment. I would like to say also, as a part of this program, one of the things that I've done that's helped a lot of European doctors, because this isn't our first time around,
Right.
we put together a video
Yes.
of showing X-ray positioning, and we're going to get
Correct.
that to you as part of this program.
Yeah.
And you can build a relationship with an imaging and take that right down to them and
Yeah.
say, "This is what we need."
Exactly.
So that kind of helps with that piece as well. Also in this boot camp, I think something is really interesting is that as far as patient management is concerned, one of
Yes.
the most important things we can do is establish chronicity. Because let's
Correct.
face it, people come in, they're 55 years old, they've been subluxated for 40 years.
Yeah.
They started shoulder pain 3 weeks ago. They think the shoulder pain started 3 weeks ago,
Correct.
but in reality, 40 years of deterioration of the disc, deterioration of the spine is led to that symptom. And it's important to be able to look at an x ray and be able to tell somebody, you know what, Mrs. Jones, 35 years ago, you had an injury and it was a straight flexion extension injury, or your head was turned, or you got hit from the side, or it's 25 years old, or whatever.
Yeah.
We're going to show you how to mark x rays to be able to tell the mechanism of injury and approximately how old it is. And that's important because when you talk to a patient about it, it establishes no, this didn't just start 3 weeks
Yeah.
ago, but this has been going on 30 years. And it takes about 1 month of care for restoration for every year back that you had a problem. So if you started a problem 30 years ago, you're 30
30
months.
months.
And
Yeah.
so it's important to establish chronicity. So there's a lot of stuff we're going to talk about.
Absolutely.
I hate to
Absolutely.
even take that detour because we got so
No,
many
no,
things
no.
to talk about. That's just one of them.
But that's great, and those are the kinds of clinical gems and pearls that make this particular boot camp worthwhile because there's a lot of stuff that you can apply on day one, even if you're not using upper cervical
Sure.
work as your major component right now. You can take things from it and apply it to your diversified practice or whatever kind of practice you're
That's
doing.
right.
That's the beauty of this. It's not just limited to an upper cervical doctor, although obviously it's geared for the upper cervical doctor, but it could be useful for any doctor. And one of the
Right.
great things about most of the material that I've learned from you throughout all of your certification courses. Well, and I am certified. Thank you very much. I'm proud of it. But, we learned a lot of stuff on neurology and other things that you would never really think would be applicable. And obviously, a lot of that comes because of your unique background, Dr. Kessinger. And you are a seeker of knowledge and always looking to expand and evolve. And one of the greatest things I have a respect for you is that you're not stuck. You grow and you develop and you continue in so many different camps and
Right.
fields to be respected. And I think out of all the now, all the knee chest groups we've got a lot of them, and there's a lot of upper cervical groups going on. But out of all, and we're starting to come together finally as a knee chest group. It seems
Yes.
that there seems to be a lot of consensus. You've seen on the things on Facebook lately, we're kind of
Yeah.
gathering. And the great thing that I see is that you are, I believe, our best representative for knee chest work, the most respected. You're the guy they invite to other upper cervical conferences to lecture. Out of all the knee chest guys, you're the guy they don't ask anybody else. I think there's a reason for that. Everybody recognizes and acknowledges your accomplishments and who you are, and we love and appreciate you for that, Rob. I
Wow,
really do that.
that's really nice. That's really sweet, Dr. Peter.
I mean
Thank
it.
you for that. It's a little embarrassing, but I do
No, it's
appreciate you
just,
saying that.
I
You
mean
brought
it.
a point out, and I could just talk all day, and I obviously I'm
Me
gonna.
too.
You can cut me off. Uh, One of the things about when we do any teaching. Now we're doing the boot camp. We're talking about the X-ray boot camp, but any teaching we do,
Yes.
I always have this axiom that goes this way: good doctors know what to do, great doctors know why.
Yeah.
So anything we teach, we want people to understand the why. You went back and you said, hey, if you're diversified and you're not doing upper cervical, maybe you're doing a little bit. If you understand, this is not just a cookbook. We're not going to tell you, okay, here's the 5 steps to find atlas, here's the 6 steps
Exactly.
for access, do that and it'll work. We're going to go through the process of teaching how biomechanically it works and how you can see it so you will understand it. And along the way, we will be talking about a bit of neurology, a bit of this, and a bit of that. It's a
Sure.
really nice, well rounded thing. It'll be fun. You'll get a lot of clinical pearls from it.
I absolutely, and I
Yeah.
think that yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, even though I've taken it already once or at least twice, I think.
Yeah, I think
But
so. I think
you know
so.
what? And I think that it's you always learn something when you repeat things, and I don't think it's a
Sure.
bad thing to do.
Yeah.
It just sharpens the
Yeah.
sword a little bit, or it
Yep.
sharpens the knife. Because it does get dull when you're chopping every day out there. Sometimes you got to take it off and sharpen it up a little bit. And that's what this type of a course is all about.
Oh, that's
And
good. That's good.
I
That's
mean
good.
it. Yeah, and we're excited to do it. I'm anybody that still hasn't signed up yet, there's still time. And we're going to I think, is there anything else you want to add, Dr.
No,
Kessinger?
I think this is good. This has been a lot of fun. Dr. Lawrence, it is always so much fun to be together with you.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're gonna have a great time. Let's
thank you.
all grow together and really become a force to be reckoned with in Europe or wherever you're at, So
Yeah.
knowledge is key.
Knowledge is key, and you've got a lot of it, and you're willing to share it, and we're all thankful for that, and thankful that we're going to have this thing starting in a couple of days. And you can go on
Yeah.
the Facebook and find out more information, or you can contact us at
That's
seminars at kcucs.edu.